Senior xenobiologist Nyx, for 27, adjusted her atmospheric filters as she stared at the strange ritual unfolding before her in the human diplomatic chamber. Ambassador Thomas Rodriguez, the Earth representative, was arranging what he called a welcome dinner, a concept that already sent shivers through her crystalline exoskeleton. "Please, join us," Rodriguez gestured to an empty chair, his warm smile doing little to ease Nyx's concerns. Her research assistant, junior scientist Zeph, nervously clicked his mandibles beside her. "Ambassador, while we appreciate the gesture, our species processes nutrients through absorption," Nyx explained, her translator working overtime to convey the politeness in her electromagnetic frequencies. Rodriguez's face fell slightly, but his enthusiasm couldn't be dampened. Of course. But surely you could observe? Cultural exchange is about understanding each other's customs." Nyx couldn't argue with that logic, though she questioned the wisdom of making first-contact protocols revolve around the bizarre human practice of ingestion. She and Zeph carefully settled into their modified seats, designed to accommodate their crystalline forms. The real shock came when Rodriguez began describing the menu. "We've prepared a lovely Earth dining experience, starting with oysters, moving to a beef Wellington, and finishing with flambéed cherries Jubilee. You intentionally set your nutrients on fire?" Zeph's translator squeaked, his crystalline structure vibrating with alarm. "It's quite spectacular." Rodriguez beamed, completely missing the horror in Zeph's bioluminescent patterns. Nyx quickly accessed her database on human customs. Yes, they regularly subjected their sustenance to extreme temperatures, chemical alterations, and even bacterial fermentation. Her previous research hadn't prepared her for witnessing it firsthand. As the first course arrived, Nyx watched in fascinated horror as Rodriguez expertly opened what appeared to be some kind of marine life form. "Are you consuming that while it's still?" She paused, searching for the least offensive term, biochemically active. "Oh, the fresher the better." Rodriguez enthused, adding something called mignonette sauce to the creature before consuming it whole. Zeph's crystalline structure nearly shattered from shock. "They don't even decontaminate their nutrients," he whispered in their native frequency. The evening proceeded like a carefully orchestrated disaster. Each course brought new revelations about human eating habits that would send shockwaves through the galactic scientific community. The beef Wellington, as it turned out, was a complex construction of multiple Earth species combined into a single dish, a concept that would horrify most civilized beings. But it was the cherries Jubilee that nearly caused an interstellar incident. When the server approached with the flaming dish, Zeph activated his emergency force field, causing a chain reaction that shut down half the building's power grid. "I assure you, this is perfectly safe," Rodriguez called out from the darkness, his voice still somehow maintaining its cheerful tone. As the backup generators hummed to life, Nyx made careful notes in her report. "Humans appear to derive pleasure from controlled destruction of nutrients through various means including thermal application and chemical modification. Further study required to understand how this species achieved spaceflight while maintaining such hazardous customs." Later that night, in the safety of their ship, Nyx and Zeph compiled their initial reports. "Should we mention the hot sauce incident?" Zeph asked, still slightly traumatized. "Let's save that for the classified appendix," Nyx decided. "The Council needs to be eased into human dietary practices gradually." As she prepared for rest cycle, Nyx couldn't help but wonder, if this was just dinner, what other surprises did human culture hold? Her last thought before entering stasis was a reluctant admission. Despite the terror, she was undeniably curious to learn more. The Galactic Council's emergency session was called after what became known as the Wasabi Incident. Xenobiologist Nyx, for 27, stood before the assembled representatives, her crystalline form still showing traces of stress fractures from the event. "Esteemed council members," she began, "we severely underestimated the human capacity for chemical warfare in their nutrient consumption rituals. The council chamber erupted in concerned murmurs as Nix projected the security footage from Earth's premier sushi restaurant, where Ambassador Rodriguez had hosted their second cultural exchange dinner. Junior scientist Zeph was merely attempting to participate in their customs, Nix explained as the footage showed her assistant delicately manipulating the green substance with his particle field. The humans referred to it as a condiment. What we didn't realize was its biological weapon potential. The footage showed Zeph attempting to analyze the wasabi through direct molecular absorption, their species' normal method of studying new compounds. The resulting explosion of crystalline shards had temporarily transformed the restaurant's ceiling into an impromptu disco ball. Most disturbing, Nix continued, was the human reaction. The footage showed Rodriguez and other human diners laughing, some even recording the incident on their primitive communication devices. Council member Vortex 9 raised a luminescent appendage. They found humor in potential xenocide? Humans appear to derive entertainment from the discomfort of others, a practice they call pranks, Nix explained. Ambassador Rodriguez later explained he should have warned us about wasabi's intensity. The council's chief medical officer interjected, and they willingly consume this substance? Not only that, Nix replied, but they have entire establishments dedicated to substances they call extra spicy. They deliberately seek out chemical compounds that cause physical distress during nutrient consumption. The footage continued, showing Rodriguez demonstrating the proper way to consume wasabi, in small amounts mixed with something called soy sauce. Even more baffling was his explanation that this was considered mild compared to other Earth cuisines. Their tolerance for toxic substances extends beyond just spices, Nix continued. They regularly consume beverages containing ethanol, caffeine, and various other compounds that would be classified as industrial solvents on most developed worlds. The council chamber fell silent as they processed this information. Finally, the head council member spoke, and yet they achieved spaceflight? While regularly poisoning themselves for pleasure? It appears, Nix replied carefully, that what we consider biological weapons, they consider seasoning. This may explain their unprecedented resilience and their seemingly random approach to scientific advancement. As if to prove her point, the footage showed Rodriguez cheerfully offering Zeph something called ghost pepper sauce, mere minutes after the wasabi incident. Fortunately, their emergency protocols had been activated by then. We must revise all human interaction protocols, Nix concluded. Their concept of sharing a meal is central to their diplomatic processes, but we cannot risk further chemical exposure incidents. The Council unanimously agreed to establish new guidelines for human-alien dining interactions, including mandatory force field protocols and emergency detoxification units at all diplomatic functions. As Nix left the chamber, her communication device chimed with a message from Rodriguez, "Hope you're both recovered. Ready to try some Mexican food next week? I promise to start you with mild salsa." Looking at the message, Nix realized that understanding humans would require more than just scientific analysis, it would require a complete recalibration of what they considered possible or sane. The Joint Human-Alien Research Facility was supposed to be a controlled environment for studying cross-species interaction. Instead, it had become ground zero for what Nix, for 27 termed human chaos theory in action. Dr. Jasmine Powell, the facility's lead human researcher, had suggested they start with something simple, observing human exercise routines. It seemed safe enough until they witnessed their first CrossFit session. They deliberately exhaust themselves to the point of cellular distress, Nix reported to her superiors, watching in horror as humans lifted heavy objects repeatedly. When asked why, they claim it's for fun or for the gains. Zeph, still traumatized from the wasabi incident, monitored from a safe distance. Their endurance capabilities defy logical explanation, he noted, watching Powell complete her workout. They continue long after their bodies signal distress. But it was the concept of runner's high that really threw their research into chaos. The discovery that humans produce their own psychoactive compounds during physical stress led to an emergency lockdown of the facility. "You're saying," the Galactic Safety Board representative clarified during the investigation, "that humans intentionally induce biochemical alterations through voluntary physical trauma?" "Affirmative," Nix replied. "They call it endorphins and actively seek this state. Some even participate in events called marathons to achieve prolonged chemical alteration." The situation escalated when the research team discovered human entertainment practices. Movie night at the facility had seemed like a safe cultural exchange activity until they showed a horror film. "They create detailed simulations of their worst fears," Nix explained to the increasingly concerned board, "then gather in groups to experience artificial terror." Dr. Powell claims this releases more of their self-produced chemical compounds. The facility's medical bay had been overwhelmed that night with aliens experiencing what humans called panic attacks after watching The Thing, a film that now featured in several alien species' nightmare cycles. Yet the humans remained frustratingly difficult to study. Their responses seemed random, their behavior patterns chaotic. One day, Powell brought something called a puppy to the facility. "The humans became temporarily non-functional," Nix reported. "Even our most stoic researchers were affected by what Powell called cuteness overload. We're still studying the implications of this psychological warfare technique." The research continued, each day bringing new revelations about human peculiarities. They discovered humans could form emotional attachments to inanimate objects, would risk their lives to save unknown members of their species, or any species, really, and had an inexplicable need to touch everything they encountered. "Do not anthropomorphize the humans," became Nix's mantra to her team, even as she found herself adopting human gestures and phrases. She caught herself saying, "cool," during a presentation and immediately scheduled a decontamination shower. The final straw came during what the humans called a karaoke night. The sight of usually dignified scientists attempting to replicate human singing patterns while consuming fermented grain juice led to 3 diplomatic incidents and 1 marriage proposal between species. In conclusion, Nix wrote in her latest report, "Humans remain an enigma. They are simultaneously the most fragile and most resilient species we've encountered. They fear death yet constantly engage in potentially lethal activities for fun. They create problems to solve problems they created solving other problems." She paused, considering her next words carefully. "Most concerning of all, they're starting to make sense to us. Request immediate psychological evaluation of all research staff for signs of human behavioral contamination." As she sent the report, Powell stuck her head into Nix's office. "Hey, we're going skydiving this weekend. Want to come? It's perfectly safe." Nix made a mental note to update her will before accepting the invitation. Sacrifice and triumph. Zara crept through the darkened corridors of the Zorgan command ship, her heart pounding. She and a small team of Valdarian warriors had infiltrated the vessel, determined to take out the warlord Xerax and cripple the Zorgan invasion. As they neared the bridge, alarms blared to life. Zorgan soldiers poured into the passageway, energy weapons blazing. Zara and her team fought back, but they were badly outnumbered. One by one, her Valdarian comrades fell, until only Zara was left, battered and bloody but unbowed. She burst onto the bridge to find Xerax waiting for her, a vicious sneer on his reptilian face. "Foolish human," he hissed. "You think you can defeat me?" Zara raised her pulse pistol. "I don't think, I know." They clashed in a furious melee, Zara's agility and training matched against Xerax's brute strength and cunning. Consoles shattered and sparks flew as they fought across the bridge. Just as it seemed Xerax would overpower her, Zara spotted a weakness in his armor. With a final, desperate lunge, she jammed her pistol into the gap and fired. Xerax stiffened, his eyes going wide, then crumpled to the deck. Zara staggered to the ship's controls. With a few quick commands, she sent the vessel careening into the heart of the Zorgan fleet. As explosions blossomed around her, she slumped to the floor, a smile on her face. She'd done it. Valdar was safe. A new dawn. Zara stood on a balcony overlooking the gleaming capital of Valdar, Ambassador Krylix at her side. In the months since the battle, the Valdarians had rebuilt, their cities rising from the ashes, stronger and more beautiful than before. "We owe you a debt we can never repay," Krylix said, his mental voice filled with gratitude. "You saved our world, at great personal cost." Zara's hand drifted to the scar on her cheek, a memento of her fight with Zerax. "Your people fought bravely," she replied. "You would have found a way, with or without me." Krylix shook his head. "Your courage and ingenuity are what made the difference. Qualities we've seen in all the humans we've met since your arrival. Your species has so much to offer the galaxy." Zara smiled, looking up at the stars. "And we have so much to learn. I hope this is just the beginning of a long friendship between our peoples." As a sleek human diplomatic vessel descended from the sky, Zara felt a sense of profound pride and hope. She'd come to this world by accident, but what had transpired since felt like destiny. A new era was dawning, an age of exploration, cooperation, and understanding between humans and the myriad races of the galaxy. And Zara knew she would be at the forefront of it, building bridges, forging alliances, and ensuring that the sacrifices made here would never be forgotten. It was a daunting task, but one she embraced with all her heart. For she was human, and standing tall in the face of adversity, reaching out to the unknown with an open hand and an open mind, that was what humans did best.